Hello, everyone. This is the 221st episode of Soccer Nostalgia Talk Podcast. As always, this is Sean from Los Angeles and the Soccer Nostalgia blog. For this episode, I interview Mr. Jan Roskott of the Dutch soccer site and Dutch professional sports historian Mr. Jurryt van der Duren as we discuss the Dutch national team during the 1974 World Cup. Mr. Van der Duren is a Dutch professional sports historian. He has written books and articles on Dutch sports history, while Mr. Roskott has been on a podcast on numerous occasions discussing the history of Dutch football. Welcome to both of you.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. Thank you.
Before we get to the World Cup, can you describe the whole Dutch football revolution from the 60s into the 70s with Ajax, Feyenoord, and total football?
Well, that's a touchy subject, I'm sure, because there's two different schools of thought about that. And as I'm from Rotterdam and Jurrit is from Amsterdam, we might have an early clash in this podcast. But I'll let Jurrit start.
Well, you're right. I'm from Amsterdam, but I'm the only person living in Amsterdam who finished his study doing research about the history of Feyenoord.
Ah, there you
So
go.
for me, it's Amsterdam and Rotterdam. And besides, as a sports historian, for me, I don't care where I live and which club I support, which is Feyenoord, by the way.
Mm,
And but if we have a look, it's what happened in only a period of 10 years, starting in 1969 until 1978. Dutch football teams played 10 international finals. And before 1969, they didn't play anyone. And it started in 1969, Ajax reaching the final of Europe Cup, losing the final against AC Milan. But then it started Feyenoord the next year, winning the cup. 1971, 72, 73 three times in a row. Ajax, 74, the Dutch team playing the final, which we will discuss later. In Germany on the World Cup, 75, FC Twente. 78, there was a final of Feyenoord also in 74 against Tottenham Hotspur, winning UEFA Cup. And 78, two finals, PSV, and again the national team. That's the revolution. No international finals before 1969. And in the next 10 years, they will play 10.
I think a lot of this has to do with a non-Dutch football coach, Ernst Happel. I think there's a lot of people in the Netherlands or internationally who still believe that Rinus Michels was responsible for total football. But I think by now it's slowly starting to seep through that Feyenoord and Ernst Happel played a real 4-3-3 and more like a total football style. And Michels and Cruyff apparently watched the game. And Michels played 4-4-2, if I'm not mistaken, in that time with Ajax. And he got sort of inspired by Happel's work. And then, of course, Cruyff and later Oranje got that whole total football stigma, or maybe not a stigma, I don't know what the English word is, but shield or badge of honor. But I think it was Feyenoord that kicked it off. Yuri, do you agree with that?
In my opinion, total football was played in the Netherlands for the first time, but is not a Dutch invention. It's an international invention, which had the first success in the Netherlands. And you're right, Ernst Happel, Feyenoord, coming from the Wounded team of Austria, coming from the tradition of Middle Europe football, which is
Mm.
very old, much older than Dutch international football tradition. And
Yeah,
if you look
Hungary,
at the
for
national
instance.
squad, also Vadronj, he was
Yeah,
very important. He
yeah,
was also in charge until Rinus Michels came in power. And Vadronj is also coming from the middle of Europe
yeah, you're
and
right.
also taking with him the old traditions of football of inside the middle of Europe. And so I agree, it's not only Ajax, it's Ajax and the national team. And Vaderonj also was a coach in not only of the national team, also I think of Willem II, Tilburg. So on a lot of Dutch places, international influence were coming. And I think it was a very special mix of old traditions of European football coming to the Netherlands because there were no traditions in the Netherlands of international football.
Yeah.
And because there was no tradition, there was plenty space of growing. And
I think there was also, if I'm not mistaken, Jurryt, there was also an issue with professional football in those days. That if you were paid to play football, you weren't selected for the Dutch national team. I think this
in
was
the
in the end of the
50s.
50s. Yeah, exactly. So we were quite late, I think, with developing a real professional football culture in the Netherlands, I assume.
Yeah, and that's why I think all those international traditions could reach the Netherlands because there was no international tradition in the Netherlands.
Mm.
So there was plenty of space to develop. There were no old traditions who could stop innovation. And just at that moment, there was someone like Rinus Michels, someone like Johan Cruyff, Willem van Hanegem, so also very important Dutch players. If they were not there, maybe there was no football, total football at all. We will never know. But the funny thing is,
Yeah.
the first time the total football was used, the name total football, it was already in 1965. Rinus Michels, in an interview of Ajax, he said, "I'm trying to play total football," which was a little other different definition than in 1974, but he was using the words total
Mm.
football already in
Mm.
1965. So before
Okay.
Rinus Michels was a coach of Feyenoord. It was all coming together, national and international traditions.
Yeah, and how was this style different from any football from the rest of Europe?
The big difference is people were playing everywhere. The players were playing everywhere. Even the numbers on the back, it was different. So there was no number one playing in the goal. There's no keeper. And everybody was doing the job all over the pitch. That's one of, I think, the biggest differences. But I'm not really good in all the tactics of football. In my
Well,
case, I
there
prefer.
were a couple of different ways that you could see. There was the catenaccio in Italy, which was a very specific tactical setup, and you had the kick and rush football in the English and the Great Britain, Ireland, Wales, and what have you. And then you had, I think, what Jurryt mentioned, the Eastern European or Middle Central European pass and move tiki-taka, you would almost say, style of Hungary and Austria. And today, I think you can see most of the tactics everywhere. It's sort of an amalgamation of what we were just discussing. But yeah, I think those were the three main tactical setups that you could see in European football in those days.
Let's look at Netherlands as a whole. How was the nation at this point culturally and sociologically, and what was football's role in it?
60s and 70s, especially the 60s, there was a kind of social revolution starting in the Netherlands. Young people didn't agree anymore how the nation was organized. It was also a response of the Second World War and the decades after by rebuilding the country only by looking at new houses, new roads, and new factories. There was no attention at all for sports or leisure or having
Culture.
fun.
Yeah.
Yes, not at all. So a lot of young people, they were not listening anymore to their parents because they made a very boring world. And one of the things they just changed, it was sports. And
Hmm.
sports became available for a lot of people because wealth was growing, more facilities, and more people were
TV
looking at
broadcasting.
yes,
TV
yes. I think
broadcasting came through. Yeah.
that's one of the most important things. Radio broadcasting, television, modern media, newspapers, and people were coming to the stadiums to watch themselves. It was not only football. If you look back, it was also in cycling with Jan Jansen winning the Tour de France in 1968, swimming, Olympic
Skating.
Games. Yeah,
Yeah.
so ice skating, a lot of
Yeah.
different sports in which the Netherlands became a good country.
There's an interesting parallel within England in the music scene when the Beatles came through in the 60s with the hair and all that. That
Mm.
really invigorated the youth in England and across the planet at a later stage. And I think the Oranje team had a similar sort of effect. They had the hair long, they were a bit rebels. They would break out of training camps to go to nightclubs without the coach knowing. There was a bit of rebellion. And as Jurrit said, we had the provos in Amsterdam and the hippies and the sit-ins and the whatnot. So I think that total football also was sort of a rebellion sort of reaction to the more catenaccio style of football that was so successful in the 50s, I would say, with the Italian teams really dominating international football.
Yeah, And to pick up on that, whenever we see images of the Dutch players of that era, we see the long hair and a certain fashion. Was this rebellion part of it all, or was it a symptom of the time everywhere in Europe at that point? Like you mentioned, as in England, there were the youth revolutions of 1968. And was this in any way linked to the footballers' fashion and demeanor at this point?
It was a part of fashion, but it was also a rebellion. I don't think most of the football players they actually were doing some any kind of rebellion. They were more followers of fashion. And Johan Cruyff started being fashionable after meeting his wife, Danny Koster. She was fashionable. And there was change and rebellion all around the world. As you said, 1968. It was also in America. There was a lot of fighting on the streets, rebellion. Even on 1968 Olympics, just before it started, there was a student revolution in the city and 300 people were killed only a couple of days before the Olympics of 1968 started in Mexico City.
Wow. Yeah.
Everywhere, Czechoslovakia, everywhere there was a kind of revolution, including the Netherlands, which is a small part of the big world. It also was a revolution. Revolution and fashion, it was combined.
Yeah, I do like to add that Johan Cruyff, I think he was one of the rebels because he really fought for better financial packages and insurances and whatnot. He was almost like a one-man union at a certain point in time where he felt that, particularly for the national team, players weren't insured. If they would go with the national team and get a big injury, they would be really in trouble. So he was always fighting the financial fight, and people always called him a money wolf and all that sort of thing, which in those days probably was justified, but I think we look back at it now and feel like he did the right thing, or he tried to do the right thing. Yeah, for his own interest, but also for his colleagues. And I think there were quite a number of those breakthroughs that were made. And a typical example was also Johan and his sponsoring. He had his own brand, if you like, his own sports brand, and he refused to play with the 3 Adidas stripes on his shirt. And he made a yeah, yeah, he made a big deal about that. He felt that he had a right to choose his own sponsors, and he didn't want the federation to determine what brand he was going to wear and not being paid for it. So I think that he was a Renaissance man in that sense.
And in that case, he was supported by his father-in-law
Very much.
because he was the one who knew about the rules. And what happened those days, we started the conversation about the Netherlands. They didn't have an international tradition in football. And in 1974, it was the first time for the Netherlands to reach the tournament after 1938, which was a lifetime. And no one of the Dutch KNVB, the football association, had any kind of experience about organizing the Dutch part of the World Cup. So they didn't know how to organize. There were no rules about paying, about insurance, just like you told. The Netherlands, they didn't fit at that moment in the international situation, and they were forced to change because of Ajax and Feyenoord and the Dutch team, because they were forced to see how it was working in international context. So at the one hand, it's a kind of rebellion. At the second hand, it's also, well, discovering a new world, which was old outside the Netherlands, but not known inside the Netherlands.
Yeah, like a natural development,
Yeah.
basically. Yeah, yeah.
And even in 1978, the KNVB, they made very big mistakes in organizing. For one example is after winning the qualification matches of the first 3 matches to reach the next stage of the World Cup, they got a lot of money of the organization, cash, and they forgot to take it out of the taxi, the cab in which they were. And
What?
the cab driver later came to the hotel and they said, "I think you forgot something." And that's how it was organized, even in 1978.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I also believe that playing for the national team wasn't as important for players back then as it
No.
is today.
Yeah.
Back then, transfers to other countries wasn't as hot as it is today. And of course, today you play in the national team, you immediately rise up in the hierarchy, or your price tag will go up, etc., etc. But I remembered in those days, it wasn't this as important. I think Cruyff only has 40 caps. 40. In today's game, he probably would have 100, 120 caps.
Speaking of Cruyff, he was the leader of this new generation and he was omnipresent in this era. though Piet Keizer was the captain at Ajax. So much of the coverage in these succeeding decades has been about the finished article, Cruyff. But what was the younger version like, breaking through and making a name for himself, and his effect on Dutch culture and society?
From what I remember reading, and I was 12 when the World Cup 74 was, and I don't think Jurryt was even born in 74 even.
Oh, thank you. I was 5 years old.
So I don't remember exactly. I haven't seen the debut of Cruyff live. I've seen it later on, of course, on YouTube. But from what I've heard, and I have a father-in-law who was close to Ajax in these days and was there all the time, he was the same when he was 16 or 17 as he was when he was 27. He was already pointing to players where to run and what to do, demanding the ball when he was 17 years old. And Piet Keizer always saw him as his younger brother, taking care of him, picking him up before a game, and even feeding him if he felt that he needed some more nutrition. But from what I've heard, Cruyff has always been like he was later.
By the time of the World Cup, he had been the most sought after player in Europe, rivaling the likes of Franz Beckenbauer, his rival and contemporary. Cruyff had won the Ballon d'Or in 1971 and 1973 and would win it in 1974, and had joined the Spanish giants of Barcelona in a big money move. So, can you paint a picture of Cruyff's fame at this point? Was it a European version of what Maradona's was like?
You want to go first, Jurrit?
Depends on who you will ask. Inside the Netherlands, there will be a complete different opinion than I think outside the Netherlands, and even inside the Netherlands. If you will ask this question in Rotterdam, most people will prefer to talk about Willem van Hanegem, who was also very, very important. And I think which was very important in those days, Willem van Hanegem accepted Johan Cruyff as a leader in the national squad. So there was no fight inside the squad about who was the leader, which was happening in Ajax, as you told about Piet Keizer, the captain. Not everybody agreed, especially Johan Cruyff. Piet Keizer was the captain, so there was an inside fight about the leadership. And because Van Hanegem accepted Cruyff as a leader in the national team, I think it's also been very important. And it's what I said, if you ask it in Amsterdam, it will be a different answer than if you will do it outside Amsterdam. There is no objective Johan Cruyff. And that's the reason why I think he is so important. There are so many Johan Cruyffs because everyone has another Johan Cruyff inside his or her head.
But it's a different story, though. If you look at the last 15, 20 years of Cruyff's life, when he wasn't actively coaching or he was just basically an analyst here or there or a public figure, there was a lot of love and respect for him from everywhere. But when he was a player, he wasn't very well liked, I don't think, in the Netherlands. Because, like I said, a lot of people felt he was a hungry money wolf. You know, he was always after money and conflicts. I don't think he was that popular. Willem van Hanegem was the people's hero, if you like. I don't think Cruyff ever was. That came much later. I think a lot of people now realize the impact Johan had on football and tactics. People like Pep Guardiola and Arsene Wenger and all these people are applauding him and giving him all these laudits and kudos. But back in the day, I don't remember that. And I agree with Jurryt. I grew up in Rotterdam, so I had a lot of Van Hanegem fans around me. I actually grew up 2 streets from Willem van Hanegem and met him many times. And I was the coach, or I couldn't call it coach really because we were little kids, but I was one of the team leaders of his son's team at the amateur club in our little town. And if you look back at the games, the World Cup 74 games, objectively, you will see that Willem van Hanegem played a much better tournament than Cruyff did. But Cruyff scored goals, and Cruyff had that sort of charisma. And as Jurryt said, Willem was quite humble in the sense that, well, he didn't score at the tournament. So that means his name was less known, I suppose. But he was the absolute playmaker of that team.
One thing I agree with you. One thing which is also important to understand the position of Johan Cruyff in Dutch society in the 60s. I don't know how to translate it in English. Maybe you can help me. It's the word sportverdwazing, which is
Mm.
typically Dutch, which means don't make sport too big. It's good to play a football match, but it's not about winning. It's not about heroes. It's not about money, which is also a part of the old Christian traditions in the Netherlands. Netherlands has been very old-fashioned, very conservative
Calvinistic.
country. And
Yeah.
sportsverdwazing, it was used every time again when someone asked for more money. And Johan Cruyff, he was, I think, the main opponent of sportsverdwazing because he wants money, he wants more organization, he wants to be a professional and also being a part of a professional organization, which was completely the opposite of sportsverdwazing. Can you translate it in English?
Well, that's a big one. I think in Australia they would say something like tall poppy syndrome. I don't know if that's a statement you hear in the US as well, but it basically means that you make yourself bigger than you need to be or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah,
But
that's something like this. Yeah, yeah.
I
Yeah.
think the point will come across though the way you explained it, Jurryt. And I
Mm.
think you're absolutely right. We wanted to see the team play. We didn't want to hear Johan moan about stripes or about something that he didn't like. And one of the things that made him unpopular, for instance, although I have to agree with him that I think he was right, but he blocked Jan van Beveren, the goalkeeper of PSV Eindhoven, and Willy van der Kuilen, the playmaker of PSV Eindhoven, to come into the squad for the World Cup. And van Beveren was considered one of the best goalkeepers we ever had in the Netherlands. But Johan felt, and it was maybe more in play, but one of the key things that Johan felt was that he was a line keeper. He was a great shot stopper on the line, but Johan, with total football, pushing forward, he wanted a goalkeeper that could play like a sweeper. So he suggested Jan Jongbloed, who was not as good a goalkeeper as Jan van Beveren, but he could play football. So he played like 15, 20 yards in front of the goal and could play as a sweeper. And that sort of thing, a lot of people in Holland felt like sportverdwazing, as Jurrit said. Johan is taking himself too serious. He's making it all about him. But in this particular case, goalkeeper, and I was a Jan van Beveren fan, but I think he wasn't the right goalkeeper for the total football style. Do you have a different opinion?
No, I agree.
As mentioned, in 1970, Feyenoord had won the Champions Cup. Ajax had been finalists in 1969 and then won three times in a row, 71, 72, 73. And I imagine at this point, there would have been a belief that the Dutch could make an impact at the World Cup level. So, Jan, I know you said you were like 12 years old at this point. In that moment in time, was it self-evident to you that this was something special historically, culturally, and of course in terms of sports, what you were living?
Well, beforehand, not at all. I think when we went to the World Cup, the qualification was not great, the whole qualification process. I actually have a bit of a, and I think Jurrit is very much aware of this as well. I've got a bit of a bomb to drop about that. If you want, I can do it now or I can do it later. But the qualification was a disaster. And we also missed our key defenders. We went to the World Cup and we didn't have Theo Lazaroms. We didn't have Barry Holshoff. We didn't have Piet Romein. We didn't have Aad Mansveld. We didn't have AP Drost. Those were key central defenders. Some of them comparable to Beckenbauer, but they were all injured. So we had to have some make-do defense with a young Ajax midfielder as a central defender and a young Feyenoord defender in the center of the pitch. And everybody felt like, oh, this is going to be a disaster. And I think after they won the first game, was it Uruguay? I think everybody felt like, wow, we're actually pretty good. Uruguay, I think, won 2 World Cups by then. So that started to get the nation all excited. And I remember we were on a summer holiday in the Netherlands, and my dad, who usually is not very flamboyant, went out to borrow or rent, I think the word is, a color TV specifically for the World Cup. And I remember thinking, that's probably a big deal if my dad rents a TV on his holiday. Let's see what it is. And obviously, as we went further and progressed into the tournament, I think everybody around us as well were thinking like, we're actually seeing something very, very special.
Quite funny, your personal experience, because you mention very important issues about the 70s, about the World Cup. The Dutch people, they didn't like the national team at all, not at
Yeah.
all. The
Why
last
was that,
match,
Jurryt?
the last, ma- the la I don't know, the last match before they left to the World Cup, everybody was booing. And
Really?
Wow.
and the first match when the Dutch team was playing against Uruguay, the players they thought if they would enter the stage, all the Dutch people would boo again. But nobody was.
Wow.
Everybody, and it was for the first time ever, was sitting in orange. They were using orange symbols.
Right.
The shirts, the world famous color orange for the
Mm.
Dutch team, also for the supporters. It was for the first time ever because
Right.
before 1974, before the World Cup, the Dutch, there was no orange. It was used in ice skating. So when there were international ice skating events, Dutch supporters were using the color orange to support their teams. And only inside the stadium people would know because, as you told, there was most people didn't have a color TV. So on television, you
Mm.
couldn't see people were sitting in orange. But because during the World Cup, more and more Dutch people were wearing orange, it was visible if you also had a color TV.
Right.
And a lot of people were buying color TVs during the World Cup. It's
Yeah.
the breakthrough in the Netherlands of the color TV, the
Yeah.
World Cup.
Yeah.
And when they were buying the television, they would see what a lot of Dutch people were sitting inside the stadium in orange. I also want to have something in orange. It's a revolution in 2 weeks. It's
Yeah.
unbelievable, which is now a
Yeah.
part of the Dutch football culture, internationally the color orange.
Yeah.
It's a revolution in 1 or 2 days.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I
there were
vividly
some
remember it.
yeah, some people were clever enough to look forward and to make a lot of orange t-shirts. And they were standing outside the stadium for the first match against Uruguay. And within 10, 15 minutes, they were sold out. And there were journalists of the Telegraaf, the big Dutch newspaper. They were looking, what's going on? What's going on? Why is everybody wearing orange? It never happened. And then also, the team was playing wonderful. It was against Uruguay, and then the Cruyff turn emerged in the second match against Sweden, and it was wonderful. So everybody was looking at it, or inside the stadium, or on a color TV, using the color
Yeah.
orange to support their own team.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Fantastic. They played in white against Sweden, if I remember. The nil-nil.
Mm,
Was it in the white?
no, no, that
Oh,
Was it
was
orange?
orange. Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
okay. Okay.
Orange and
I
One
remember
blue.
fun,
that.
one
Yeah.
fun fact of that match, Johan Cruyff was actually ill at the moment he was doing the Cruyff term.
All
Nine
right.
players of the Dutch squad, they having a virus at that moment because
Mm.
and they
All right.
didn't know a name of it. They were calling it the orange virus. And at
Really?
the moment Cruyff was doing his Cruyff turn, which is not a thing in Dutch in the Netherlands or by the way, but when he was doing the Cruyff turn, he had a fever.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I remember the nil-nil against Sweden, and it sort of brought us down a little bit because we had that Uruguay game. Oh, great. And then the nil-nil, nil-nil. And then Argentina came, and I think that sealed the deal for a lot of people. Argentina, of course, a huge footballing nation, and 4-1, if I'm not
No,
mistaken.
Bulgaria, Bulgaria, and then
Was it first
Argentina.
Bulgaria, yeah.
Bulgaria?
Yeah,
Ah,
yeah.
right.
The next
Okay.
stage,
Okay.
Second
Argentina,
round, yeah,
yeah,
Yeah.
under
yeah.
the rain,
Yeah.
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 It's almost hard to picture that the Dutch had not participated in a World Cup since the war. How had that conditioned the Dutch psyche in terms of the World Cup?
The national team was not important in Dutch football. And the most important matches, traditionally, it was the Netherlands against Belgium, the Derby der
Yeah.
Lage Landen, the Derby of the Low Countries. And when international football, especially in the 50s and 60s, were becoming bigger and bigger, the Netherlands were not playing an internet in a very important part of it. And it was more on a national level, supporting your own city. And if you were coming from the north, it was Heerenveen and Abel Enstra. And if you were from the south, it was Fortuna or in Rotterdam, Feyenoord and Sparta. And the national squad, it was not a big deal in the Netherlands. It was not well organized. KNVB didn't know how to organize. And sometimes there were some little successes, like in 1956 when the Western Germany had won the World Cup and then was playing against the Netherlands, and the Dutch were winning. But it was only one match. They never reached the final stage. I think the only time they nearly missed It was when they had to play against Austria in 1957, two matches which were not very nice matches. It was a fight on the pitch between the players, and in Austria said the Dutch they are responsible, and in the Netherlands they said Austria they are responsible. Happel was playing for Austria at that moment, and then the Netherlands they didn't reach the last stage for the World Cup 1958. So every time again it was they didn't reach an European Cup, the Europe Cup. It was only in the 60s starting. It was not a deal in the Netherlands.
But it's interesting, if you look at Feyenoord and Ajax, the teams back then in 69, 70, we should have gone to the 1970 Mexico World Cup with the players that we had, but we obviously didn't. We didn't even come close. We were in a group with Bulgaria, Poland, and Luxembourg, and we didn't even get close to qualifying. And no one cared. The media, the public, there was hardly any interest in the national team, like you had said.
Ajax Feyenoord, they didn't cooperate also. They didn't want to
That's
send
right.
their
Yeah,
best
that's right.
players. So it was also a struggle about who is having the power in Dutch football. Is it the football
Professionalism,
union
yeah.
or is it Ajax and Feyenoord? And Ajax Feyenoord, because of the circumstances, they already had a lot of international experience. They were much better organized than the KNVB itself.
Yeah.
I think it's also a part of organization, not only of talent. It's also a part of organization.
Oh, absolutely. I agree. Yeah. And culture. Yeah, I
Yeah.
fully agree.
Yeah. The 1974 World Cup qualification was achieved with some difficulty, and in a sliding doors moment, the Dutch might not have even qualified had VAR
They
existed back
should
then.
not.
Yeah,
They
had
should
VAR
not
existed
have.
back then. So-
That's the bomb I was talking about earlier. You're
Yeah.
totally right. We shouldn't have gone to the World Cup
If there
in
was
all
a VAR
honesty.
in 1973, we wouldn't have this conversation.
At all. We wouldn't have been talking about total football. We wouldn't be talking about any of this. Yeah, I agree. Guardiola wouldn't have existed.
Because what happened in the last match against Belgium in the Olympic Stadium in Amsterdam, just a couple of minutes before the end, the Belgium they scored, and it was offside, the ref said, but it wasn't offside.
It's a proper goal.
Yeah, it was a proper goal. And if that proper goal was a proper goal, then the Netherlands would have lost the match and never had seen Germany in 1974.
Yep.
Wouldn't have been a part of the World Cup.
And we wouldn't have our bicycles back either.
That's talking about the Second World War. Huh?
After achieving qualification, the Dutch manager, František Vathonk, left his post to be replaced with Rinus Michels. What were the circumstances for this replacement?
That's a question for Jurryt, I think. I can't really remember. I think Vathonk was popular amongst the players, though.
Yeah, because he allowed the players to eating fries after a match, and Michels,
okay.
he was tough.
Disciplinarian.
But there was one problem with Rinus Michels. He already had a job. He was the coach of Barcelona, so he was combining Barcelona and the World Cup at the same time. He left the World Cup for a match of Barcelona. So he was doing two jobs at the same time. Maybe that's also one of the reasons why in the final stage of the World Cup, Rinus Michels was not at his best because he had two jobs. He must have been exhausted. And
I didn't realize that Barcelona played during the World Cup.
When I was doing it was last year, it was exactly 50 years ago after the World Cup. So I was doing day by day following what happened 50 years ago.
Oh.
And then I found out he was still very busy for Barcelona. Of course, it was not a competition because all the Spanish players,
their cup matches were usually late in the season in Spain, if I'm not.
Yeah. He had to go back for a cup match. So it's unbelievable. The man in charge wasn't in charge because he also was in charge in Barcelona. He was in charge in Barcelona and in Germany. It was too much. And I think also that's a kind of lack of experience of KNVB by organizing it that way. Now we know it's one of the most important events in Dutch sports history, and we know now. But also in those times, it's the first World Cup since the Second World War. And then you have a coach who is also the coach of Barcelona. Maybe that's the best they could organize. I don't know. I wasn't a part of the board that time, and also not this time. Most people, they don't know he was coach of two things at the same time.
He wasn't even called the coach. I think they called him the supervisor or something like that.
Yeah, something like that.
Because there
Yeah.
was some contractual issue with Vadrons or whatever. So they said, no, he's not going to be the coach. He's going to be the supervisor.
Yeah, and
But
there were a lot of tensions inside the organization. I can remember some assistants of Michels, they left during the World Cup before the final.
To pick up on some of the points raised by Jan earlier, Ajax defender Barry Hulshoff, he appeared to be the main absentee from the final list, and Jan van Beveren and Peter Schrijvers appeared to be in contention for the starting goalkeeper position. But as you said, by 1974, Jan Youngblood was chosen. And again, it was known that Van Beveren had problems with Cruyff. Similarly, Willy Brokamp of MVV appeared to have issues with the Ajax contingent as well. These internal problems would be the narrative of Dutch football in international football for the succeeding decades.
yeah, I guess there's a bit of cultural issues between everything south of the river, as we call it in Holland, and north of the river. The Feyenoord and Ajax players, although there was a very fierce rivalry between them, and there's famous stories of Johan Neeskens of Ajax fighting duels with Willem van Hanegem of Feyenoord on the pitch, but off the pitch, they were really great mates. The Feyenoord and Ajax players respected each other. Like Jurryt said, Van Hanegem was happy for Cruyff to be the big guy, even though Willem was probably the silent force behind it. But the PSV players were always seen a little bit as whingers, as whiners and moaning and complaining. And there was one point where I think Cruyff, probably, I don't know about Neeskens because he was still at Ajax, I think, officially. But when Cruyff came into the training camp later from Barcelona, Van
After doing the
Beveren,
shopping.
yeah, exactly. There you go. And then Van Beveren made a comment about that. Oh, here's Mr. Hollywood or something like that, allowed to come in late because Johan probably did have some privileges. So there was a bit of jealousy going on there and envy between them. And I think that, well, not still maybe, but even 20 years ago, players from the East or from the South who would come into the dressing room at Ajax, they would be a little bit ridiculed for their accent or something like that. Even Erik ten Hag, when he started coaching Ajax, had 1 or 2 seasons worth of ridicule, not just from the fans, but even from the media for the way that he spoke.
Telegraaf, the most important,
Yeah.
the Ajax newspaper. Yeah, that's the difference. You already named Willy Brokamp. He's from the south. Maastricht played for Ajax, but he was most famous because of his years in Maastricht.
He was a great
And
player.
yeah, PSV. At that time it was starting to become a top club. It wasn't
Yeah.
at that time. It was Ajax, Feyenoord, the big two, the best 2 clubs of the world at that time, playing in one national competition. And during the 70s, when Kees Rijvers was the coach of PSV, then PSV was also reaching the stage, especially in 1978, winning the UEFA Cup in a final against Bastia. And then it was the 3rd Dutch club winning an international prize. But it's not in 74, it's only in 78. So the south of the Netherlands is not accepted in Dutch football. From the north, especially from the west, you can say, Rotterdam.
Is it still like that, Jurryt?
Yes, it is. It is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think so too.
But PSV is now, of course, very important.
Yeah, big club. Oh yeah,
Since
yeah.
in the last 50 years. But and a lot of players from the West, like Ruud Gullit and Gerard Vanenburg, they
Wim
have been
Kieft.
playing at PSV, so there has been a major shift. But you still can see there is differences between the north of the big rivers in the Netherlands, where I live, and the south, which is
Yeah,
it's like cities of Maastricht and Eindhoven.
they had a bit of an inferiority complex as well, I guess. Anyway,
With Barry Hulshoff out, Ari Hahn would be playing in a more defensive role for the World Cup. So let's look at the final 22 chosen for the World Cup. So as goalkeepers, number 8, you have Jan Youngblood of FC Amsterdam. Number 18, Pete Schrijvers of Twente Enschede. And number 21, Eddie Treitel of Feyenoord. For defenders, you have number 4, Cies van Yersel of Twente Enschede. Number
Case.
5, Kees.
Case.
My apologies.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, that's okay.
Yeah, difficult Dutch names.
Yeah.
Number 5, you have Rinus Israel of Feyenoord. Number 12, Ruud Krol of Ajax. Number 17, Wim Rijsbergen of Feyenoord. Number 19, Pluim Strik of PSV Eindhoven. Number 20, Wim Suurbier of Ajax. And number 22, Harry Vos of Feyenoord. Midfielders, number 2, you have Arihan of Ajax. Number 3, Wim van Hanegem of Feyenoord. Number 6, Wim Janssen of Feyenoord. Number 7, Theo de Jong of Feyenoord. Number 10, René van der Kerkhoff of PSV Eindhoven. Number 11, his twin, Willy van der Kerkhoff of PSV Eindhoven. And number 13, Johan Niskens of Ajax. Up front, at number 1, you have Ruud Gilles of Club Brugge in Belgium. Number 9, Piet Keizer of Ajax. Number 14 and captain of the team, Johan Cruyff of Barcelona in Spain. Number 15, Rob Rensenbrink of Anderlecht in Belgium. And
He had a great tournament.
Yes, and
Didn't
number 16, Johnny Rep of
he?
Ajax, in a team managed by Rinus Michels. And just to mention, Rijsbergen and Willy van der Kerkhoff, they earned their first cap just days prior to the tournament. I know, Jan, you were 12 years old and a football fan. Perhaps, Jurryt, you may have been too young maybe to
I
experience
was. I
it.
haven't
Yeah.
seen any minute of 1974. I was 5 years old. 1978. That's my first experience of the Dutch on the World Cup. I can remember everything of 1978. I cannot remember anything of 1974 because I didn't watch.
I think there's a 78 podcasts coming soon, Jurryt.
Yeah, I think it's in a chronological way. Yes, it must be.
Yes, the research is all ready, so just warning you. Jan, you would have been the one who really experienced this as a young football fan at a perfect age, in fact.
I agree. Yeah, and like I said, I was happy to grow up in a town where Wim Jansen and Willem van Hanegem, Peter Ressel and Dick Snyder lived. And Snyder was a family friend. He gave our family season's tickets for the Kuip every season. And like I said, I played football with Willem's son Gert, so I was totally into it. And it's just fantastic experience to watch the team play. But I also enjoyed the German team, funnily enough. I thought the German team also was quite spectacular with Overraad and Beckenbauer. Yeah, really. What's the name? Bonhoff. There was really good players. I don't remember many. I remember that Brazil was so disappointing in that tournament, and everybody was raving about it. My dad was a huge Pelé and Garrincha fan, so he always told me stories about Brazil, but I didn't see it in the tournament. But yeah, when you're 12 years old, you're a sponge. You know, everything is soaked up, and the media was different. We didn't have the internet, obviously, and the media was a little bit slow picking up on everything. We had one football magazine, I think. Was it A0? Do you remember that, Jurryt? Was it
Yeah,
the
Football
name
International already existed, but it wasn't as big as it is now. There was some, but yeah,
yeah.
it was less. It was definitely less.
Yeah, so you didn't know much about what was going on, but it was really exciting. I never knew Rob Rensenbrink until the tournament. Most of the Ajax and Feyenoord and Twente players I knew, of course, and Ruud Geels, I think by then already played for Feyenoord and Ajax before he went to Bruges, but I'm not sure. But I had no idea who Robbie Rensenbrink was. The only thing I thought every now and then is like, is that Cruyff's twin brother? What's going on? But he was just unbelievable. They call him
That
the
was, I
snake.
think, also the reason why the Guardian, they made a mistake after the death of Cruyff by having the picture of Rob Rensenbrink on the front page.
Oh,
Who died.
really?
Yeah.
Oh, really? Oh, I didn't know that. Oh, wow. But yeah, the Snake Man, he was sensational. And I'm left-footed myself. I've played football like most kids in Holland. I'm a left-footed player. So Rensbrink and Van Hanegem were my two heroes.
And I just realized I pronounced Gilles. I said Gilles. So again, I apologize for my pronunciation errors.
Ruud is not
You
going
did it quite
to
well.
complain.
You did it
Yeah.
quite well. We understood
Yeah,
the name,
actually,
so
yeah, you did. I agree.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
agree.
Now, it's often presented to us as if the Dutch surprised and took the world by storm in this World Cup. But there were already household names at this point. I know you said there were maybe not that many magazines, but do you, Jan, you remember the coverage of the Dutch in real time at that point?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And did you notice that maybe other, I don't know if you paid attention, if the media from other nations, were they surprised or were these players already big names, so they were not much of a surprise?
Oh, I wouldn't know. I don't have memory from that time.
Foreign media played a kind of role for the Dutch quarter when Bild Zeitung was writing a big article about the swimming pool of the hotel in which the Dutch team was located just a couple of days before the final was played.
Oh,
And
yeah.
some
Yeah,
Dutch players were swimming naked with some naked girls. And
famous story, of
Yeah,
that
course.
was a
more
Yeah,
big
about that.
riot. And
Yeah.
that's also one of the things, my opinion is that Dutch football had no experience at all because Bild Zeitung, that's what they do. They
yeah.
always write articles like that. So they would
They
also
they
do about the
actually
Dutch team.
they recruited those girls.
Oh,
Build
maybe.
magazine.
But
Yeah,
then,
no, they did.
esp-
That came
yeah,
out later. It did. It was people from Build who actually said,
yeah,
yes, we set it all up. It was
yeah,
our plan to have this thing happening so that the
yeah,
Mannschaft would have a benefit in the
yeah,
finals.
yeah. So there was no experience at all for KNVB how international media would cover something like that. And the hotel wasn't closed for foreign people. So a lot of journalists, they were just walking inside and outside at any time. And if you're a professional, it's better not to do. And especially in the last stage, there were a lot of journalists walking in and out because in the first stage, there was a lot of protection of the Dutch team because there were some fears about a terrorist attack against the Dutch national squad. Because,
Oh, yes, we should remind everyone this is 2 years after
The
Munich and
Olympic.
the terrorist
yeah,
Yep.
yeah, yeah.
attack.
After Munich
Correct.
and the Netherlands, they supported Israel in the beginning of the 70s. And that's why there was a lot of fear against the terrorist attack against, especially Johan Cruyff. And if you see the hotel in which they were located, Wald Hotel, a lot of soldiers were surrounding the hotel with heavy guns, also protecting the squad of Chile after the Pinochet coup. And a lot of people protest against Chile on the World Cup because as a fascist country. But the Dutch team, they had a lot of protection, and only in the final stage, there when they left Wald Hotel, maybe there was not as protection anymore, and a lot of journalists they just walked in and out. And
Yeah, that's a very famous story indeed. Yeah, 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 yeah. I think to answer your question as well from the angle from international media, Feyenoord had won the UEFA Cup in a two-match against Spurs, and I think Van Hanegem made a lot of impression in England. I remember that in the 15 years after the '74 World Cup, they would really speak with lots of respect about him. I think Neeskens made a lot of impact, and he went to Barcelona. I think in that season as well in the South American contingent, particularly the Brazil Holland game later on in the tournament. Neeskens was considered a real warrior by the Brazilians and the Argentines.
what a
And there's
match it was
actually
a war.
it was incredible. One of the best matches I remember having seen. But there's even a player, I think he's from South America, who used to play professionally in England until a year or so ago. And his first name is Neeskens because his dad was a big fan of Johan Neeskens, which is quite funny. I think Rensenbrink was already considered a huge name because of his Anderlecht history, of course. So I think that slowly but surely there were a couple of players that were getting a lot of attention internationally.
But before the World Cup started, nobody expected this,
No,
even especially not inside the Netherlands.
no, yeah,
So for the World Cup, the Dutch were in Group C along with Uruguay, Sweden, and Bulgaria. They start the World Cup on June 15th against Uruguay at Hanover. They would win this match 2-0. For this match, you have a lineup of Youngblood, Kroll, Reisbergen, Surbie, Hahn, Van Hanegem, Janssen, Niskens, Cruyff, Rensenbrink, and Rep. The Dutch would win 2-0. Johnny Rep scoring both goals. The first goal, Surbia's cross from the right, was headed by Rep. And for the second goal in the 86th minute, it was Rensenbrink's cross from the left that was knocked in by Rep. A few days later, on June 19th at Dortmund, they faced Sweden, a Sweden team that contained two PSV Eindhoven players, Björn Nordqvist and Ralf Edström. Other familiar faces included Ronnie Hellstrom in goal, Roland Sandberg of Kaiserslautern as well. This match ended as a scoreless tie. the famous match we mentioned earlier with the Cruyff turn. You have the following lineup: Youngblood, Krol, Rijsbergen, Suurbier, Hahn, Van Hanegem. He'd replaced by De Jong in the 73rd minute. Janssen, Kaiser, Niskens, Cruyff, and Rep. And for Pete Kaiser, this would be his 34th and final cap for the Dutch. His first cap had been in 1962. Besides the historical significance of the Cruyff move that you see all the time on social media, this was the last time for Pete Kaiser. Do you think the World Cup perhaps arrived a bit too late for him?
I would say so. He was past his prime by then, I think. He was a glorious player, though.
Just like Jacques
But he was
Zwart.
more, yeah, exactly like Swart and Moulin. He was a bit like just the older school back then. He could just stand still during a game. And I think the total football team in 74, one of the things was they were all constantly on the move, constantly moving position. And Kaiser, I wouldn't say it was lazy probably, but he was just an old-fashioned player.
The last match in the group was on June 23rd at Dortmund, and this time the Dutch defeated Bulgaria 4-1.
So 4 years before this game, Bulgaria was too strong for us, and they made it to Mexico, I think, and we didn't. So it was a big deal. I think now we look at this and we think, yeah, Bulgaria, but it was a big deal back then.
This is Bulgaria. You have the likes of Hristo Bonev. I mean, Bulgaria had qualified to the World Cup 1962, 60. I don't know if we made it 66. Yeah, 66, 70,
66 and
74.
70. Yep.
So they
Yep.
were regular World Cup qualifiers.
Yeah.
And for this match, you have the following lineup: Youngblood, Krol, Rijsbergen, Suurbier, Hahn, Van Hanegem. He'd be replaced by Rinus Israel in the 36th minute. Janssen, Niskens. He'd be replaced by De Jong in the 79th minute. Cruyff, Rensenbrink, and Rep. And in this match, the Dutch took the lead in the 5th minute through penalty kick from Niskens after Cruyff had been fouled in the box. They doubled the lead in the 45th minute with another penalty kick. This time, Janssen was fouled in the box, and Niskens again scored from a penalty kick. 71st minute, there's a free kick on the right side that was headed across to the right by the Bulgarian Zonyo Vasilev, and Johnny Rep volleyed it in. Bulgaria pulled the goal back when a cross from the left side was knocked into his own goal by Ruud Krol. But just before the end, in the 88th minute, Cruyff's cross from the left was headed in by De Jong.
A diving header, wasn't it?
Yeah. So the Dutch are in the second round, and there's a second group phase. There are all the conspiracy theories that West Germany lost on purpose to East Germany to avoid the Dutch in this round. We'll never know if it's true or not.
I can hardly imagine because that's so extremely political. There had been preparations in Eastern Germany for the World Cup for years and years and years because it was a battleground for Eastern Germany to play a match on the west side. And then they were in the group stage combined playing against each other. And Jürgen Sparwasser, of course, he's the most famous by beating Western Germany. Maybe that's the save of Western Germany because they didn't start the tournament very well. And then inside the Western Germany squad, there was a kind of revolution when the players took over. And from that moment, the Western Germany squad was playing much better than after. So I think it's nearly impossible they would lose from Eastern Germany because of avoiding the Netherlands. I can hardly imagine. It's just like North and South Korea. They would never do something like that.
So in this final round, they're in Group A along with Argentina, Brazil, and East Germany. So the Dutch, their first game in this round is on June 26th at Gelsenkirchen against Argentina. And this is an Argentina team, some familiar names: Ruben Ayala playing at Atletico Madrid in Spain, Mario Kempes, Rene Hausmann, Hector Yazalde. This match, we have the following lineup: Youngblood, Krol, Rijsbergen, Suurbier. He replaced by Rinus Israel in the 84th minute. Hahn, Van Hanegem, Janssen, Niskens, Cruyff, Rensenbrink, Rep. This match, the second half of this match will be played under rain. But before that, the Dutch had already taken a 2-0 lead. In the 10th minute, you have that famous Johan Cruyff goal where from the middle, Van Hanegem lofted the ball in the box. Cruyff controlled, dribbled around the Argentine goalkeeper and scored. That's another reference goal that you see all the time. And in the 25th minute, there's a corner kick from the right side, and it was pushed out by the Argentine goalkeeper. And Ruud Kool struck with a long range shot from outside of the box. Beautiful goal. And in the second half, there's the rain. And in the 73rd minute, Cruyff crossed from the left side, and Johnny Rep headed in at the far post. And in the 90th minute, you have the Argentine goalkeeper Carnevali parrying an attempt. The ball fell to the left side, and Cruyff shot from a narrow angle and from a distance to score the fourth goal.
Glorious goal.
Yeah.
And as you're told, the match was played in Gelsenkirchen, which is nearly in the Netherlands. It's if you go to the south to the city of Kerkrade, you just have to walk for a couple of minutes. It's almost a twin city, and it's so close to the Netherlands. That's also one of the reasons a lot of Dutch supporters were going to the matches. If it was in Mexico or in Argentina, it would have been completely different. It was almost at home, Gelsenkirchen. And just like other matches in Western Germany, it was so close for Dutch supporters to come. And when the event was getting bigger and bigger for the Dutch squad, a lot of people wanted to see the match themselves because it was so close. I think that's one also of the big reasons why it became so popular, the Dutch team. They were playing almost at home.
And their next match was against East Germany on June 30th at the same place, Gelsenkirchen. For this match, we have Youngblood, Hahn, Suurbier, Rijsbergen, Krol, Van Hanegem, Janssen, Niskens, Rep, Cruyff, and Rensenbrink. The Dutch would win 2-0 in the 13th minute. A shot from the edge of the box was deflected by an East German, and Niskens volleyed in the loose ball. And in the 59th minute, from the left, Cruyff passed across to Rensenbrink, who shot from just inside the box, and the Dutch won 2-0.
Yeah, in Holland, we would now call that a Veermannetje, because that was a typical Joey Veerman goal. Inside of the foot, placed, almost passed into the corner. So really a neat goal.
Yeah. The last match in the group, bearing in mind both Brazil and the Dutch had won their first two matches in this group, so it was a group decider, essentially a semifinal, we could even call it, between.
You know what? I always thought it was the semifinal. I never knew it was a group game, to be honest.
Yeah, there were two group stages.
Until now. This is the first time I realized that. I'm at my age. Thanks.
So this match on July 3rd at Dortmund with the Dutch wearing a white kit and Brazil wearing a blue kit at this match.
You know why the Dutch wore white in this match? So the blood would show better.
That's the first time I hear about that.
I'm just kidding, of course.
No, that's okay.
Who knew that would happen? But in hindsight. Anyway.
So for Brazil, you have some familiar faces: Emerson Leão in goal, Luis Pereira, Marinho, Rivellino, Jairzinho, managed by the legendary Mario Zagallo. So this match on July 3rd, a violent match, but the Dutch would win 2-0. You have the following lineup: Youngblood, Krol, Rijsbergen, Suurbier, Hahn, Van Hanegem, Janssen, Niskens. He'd be replaced by Rinus Israel in the 85th minute. Cruyff, Rensenbrink. He'd be replaced by Theo de Jong in the 67th minute, and Rep. And for Rinus Israel, this was his 47th and final cap for the Dutch. His first cap had been in 1964. The Dutch would win 2-0 in the 50th minute. Cruyff's cross from the right side was knocked in by Niskens. They scored a second in the 65th minute when Krol's cross from the left side was knocked in by Cruyff.
Amazing goals, both of them. They were really good goals.
Yes. This would be a match where there would be many bookings, and the Brazilian Luis Pereira would be sent off in the 84th minute. After he was sent up, I guess he was being taunted by the Dutch supporters. And as he was leaving the field, he started holding three fingers, signifying that Brazil had won three World Cups. Also, later, Marinho would be suspended for 3 matches for kicking Niskens during this match.
And they became good friends later when they both played for New York Cosmos, didn't they?
Oh, yes,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah. Funny,
So
those guys.
the Dutch reached the final. They would be facing the hosts, West Germany. Background to this match ahead of facing West Germany. You already mentioned about the article by the West German tabloid magazine Bild that reported about the alleged partying by the Dutch players in their hotel. But we also have to remember that the Second World War had only been like 30 years prior.
Don't mention the war.
Yeah, and well, it's important because Wim van Hanegem's feelings about facing the Germans are well known due to the death of his father and brother in German bombings.
And his
And
sister as well.
so, in the greater Dutch culture, how was this felt as the Dutch were to face the West German hosts in the final?
Well, in 1988, we played the semi-finals against West Germany in the European Championship. And even then, the Second World War was an item. So I think in 74, it definitely was an item. And as you mentioned with Van Hanegem, but I also think just a lot of people in the Netherlands had the feeling that this was one way of getting revenge. And the chant that can we get our bikes back was obviously a bit of a taunt towards that situation, or that war, I should say. But yeah, I think that that definitely played a role. I think Rotterdam, and Jurryt will know that too, was damaged tremendously by the Germans in the Second World War, completely erased from the map. So there was quite a lot of animosity towards the Germans back then.
I think it's getting bigger after the final. It was
Yeah,
before the final, maybe it was an issue, but I think after the final it became bigger and bigger because the Dutch they lost. And then it became a big event about losing again from the Germans. Again, referring to the Second World War, after the beginning of the Second World War. Because when the Dutch team, they came back to the Netherlands after the final, so not winning the World Cup, they were going to the Queen. Everybody was
a
applauding like they
parade.
just won the final.
Yeah, they had a
And
big parade. Yep.
there was a big parade. They had a winners' parade for the losers.
Yep.
So it was still feeling like winning. And until now, Johan Cruyff cannot say it himself anymore, but he always said we were the best, but we didn't win.
Yeah.
And
Well, Johan
that's
Cruyff
how
also always said maybe we didn't win, but people still talk about us. They don't talk about that West
yeah.
German team anymore, which I guess in a way it's true.
I think the war is from after, not from before.
Getting back to that Bild article that Jan said that many have speculated that it was actually the magazine who had set it up to give them this edge. And it's been reported that Johan Cruyff spent the night before the final on the phone reassuring his wife about the article and all that. So whether it had that effect on the Dutch team, I mean, that's also a matter of speculation.
It had
Well,
because it was a
yeah,
main event. It was a main event, and I have the bill of the Dutch team in the hotel in the Netherlands. It's in the National Archives, so I can see exactly the amount of telephone calls in the day after the publication in Bild Zeitung. It was massive. There has been a massive phone calls from the hotel of the Dutch squad after the publication in Bild Zeitung.
it's been confirmed that Bild Zeitung actually organized it. It's not a rumor. It has been confirmed. And what Jurryt said is 100% true. It appears that Johan, who wasn't at the pool, he was not Johan Cruyff. He was not in the pool with the girls. But Danny, who's not an easy woman to deal with, wanted to know everything about that incident. And apparently Cruyff spent hours that night on the phone with Danny in Spain to explain the situation and what happened, and it will have affected their game. I'm 100% convinced.
Besides the Germans, they were better.
Well, yeah, there's an interesting story, and I'm not sure if you know it, Jurryt, but it's I think I don't know. David Winner, I think, wrote a book on it, Brilliant Orange.
And Auke Kok also did. He also
Ah,
wrote
right.
the
Okay.
commentary.
Yeah. Bernd Holzenbein was interviewed, and he said that before the game, they could hear the Dutch dancing and singing already in the dressing room. They were so arrogant and so cocky. And then the German players said in the tunnel when we go onto the pitch, just look them in the eye, just make them understand that they're going to have a big fight on their hand. And then Holzenbein later said, when we were in the tunnel, we looked at them and we couldn't look at them. They were so impressive that we felt like we're done for. But then the Dutch score in the first minute, or probably the third minute of the game, and then after that they just started to pass the ball around like arrogant players trying to ridicule us and humiliate us. And that's when we felt like, oh, this is not going to happen. And that's when the Dutch lost,
Yeah.
according to Hulzenbein. Well, you
Yeah.
can't trust Hulzenbein though, because he made a dive for the penalty, so he's an untrustworthy guy.
And of course, this match has been analyzed ad nauseum since then. This match on July 7th at Munich at Olympiastadion against the West Germany of Franz Beckenbauer and all the familiar names, Bertie Vogts, Paul Breitner, Gerd Müller, Uli Hoeneß. So, of course, Bertie Vogts was to mark Johan Cruyff in this match. It's often reported that he was the one who fouled Cruyff before any German player had touched the ball, but it was actually Uli Hoeneß who actually, I think he fouls him from behind, though it's Bertie Vogts who gets a yellow card in the third minute. So I'm not really sure whether maybe they both made contact, but anyway. In any case, Cruyff was fouled before a single German player had touched the ball. And again, for this match, you have the standard lineup: Youngblood, Krol, Rijsbergen. He'd replaced by De Jong in the 68th minute, Surbier, Hahn, Van Hanegem, Janssen, Niskens, Cruyff, Rensenbrink. He'd replaced by René van der Kerkhoff and Rep. Now, it's also been speculated that it was Cruyff and not Michels who made the decision to have René van der Kerkhoff replace Rensenbrink in this match. I don't know if it's been confirmed since then. But obviously, we all know what happens. Then in the 25th minute, Holzenbein is fouled or dove after making contact with Janssen, and Paul Breitner tied the match from a penalty kick. Just before halftime, in the 43rd minute, you have Rainer Bonhoff crossing from the right side and Gerd Müller turning and scoring the winner. Incidentally, Rainer Bonhoff, he was born, I'm not sure, is he born inside Germany or very close to German border?
He could have
or
been a Dutch player. Yeah, he could have
Yeah,
been a Dutch player.
yeah,
Yeah, I know. Is it his? I think his dad is German, his mum is Dutch, or something like that. I don't
yeah.
know exactly, but yeah, he could have chosen the Dutch. He played for Dutch amateurs teams when he was really young. Yeah.
So, and in the second half, there's also a goal by Gerd Müller that was ruled out offside, but later television replays show that it was valid. But in any case, the Germans would hold on, they would win 2-1 and
Sepp
would win
Maier
the
was
World Cup.
incredible that game, by the way. The
Yeah.
German goalie. He did do a good job.
Ever since then, this 1974 Dutch side has been compared to the 1954 Hungarians and the 1982 Brazilians as one of the best teams not to win the World Cup. Mm,
Yeah. I think that's in both Johnny Rep and Ruud Krol said after the game that well, not after the game, literally, but later, we were focusing on humiliating the Germans and we forgot to score the second goal. We were just playing the ball around and trying to make them look like fools, and that bit us in the bum at the end of the day.
So how did you experience it as
Oh, it
a
was
witness?
horrific. Horrific. It was terrible because by then we were still at our holiday address with the TV, and obviously a lot of people around us knew that we had a color TV, and we started to get socializing with other people there holidaying. So we had maybe 12 or 15 people in the room watching it, and we were all thinking, well, we're going to win this. How good are we? We've got the best players, we've got the best playing style, and then we got 1-0 up in the first minute, and you're like, yeah, man, this is it. It's a bit like Ajax against Tottenham Hotspur in that semi-finals Champions League, where you feel like you can't lose this, but we did. And it's funny because I think looking back, and Jurryt might have his opinion on this, there's people that said that if Jan van Beveren was in the goal, he would have stopped that Gerd Muller goal because he was so quick with his reflexes on the line, and Youngblood was not known to be that. So in
I
this
don't think
last
that's the
match,
main thing. I don't
no,
think
it's
that's
not.
not the main problem. I think you
No, no, no,
already
no.
referred to Ajax, Tottenham Hotspur. I think one of the main problems in Dutch football is they want to be the best of the match,
Yep,
and that's not the thing. If you're playing soccer at the highest level, you have to win the match.
yep,
It's not
yep,
necessary to be the best,
yep.
and that's the biggest problem I think in a lot of times in Dutch football. Not all times, but a lot of times the Dutch players want to be the best and they don't want to
Yeah, I
win the
mentioned
game.
that. Yeah, exactly right. The aim was to humiliate the Germans. I think the Jan
Mm,
van Beveren comment is just a bit of a funny comment afterwards,
yeah,
where
yeah,
people would say, well, maybe it was better to have him in the team. But that's all looking into a cow's arse, as we say in Holland.
yeah. And I can imagine all those discussions started after the match because, well, I was already telling I didn't see the match for me, so it's not a personal frustration. But
Mm,
I've been part of the society after, and I know it's a massive frustration for a whole generation. And
mm.
then you're trying to find all reasons and excuses and theories why losing the match. And one of the things could have been by replacing the keeper, but we'll never know. That's what we call if history. We will
No,
never
but
know.
let
There
let's
will be,
face it.
maybe there will be another universe in which there is a discussion
Exactly.
about the match of Jan van Beveren.
If he would have been in the team, we might not have even reached the finals. Who knows?
Yeah, yeah.
It's not even, it's a bit silly to discuss that. But I agree, it's just one of those things. And the Dutch do tend to fall into their own sword kind of thing. It's not the
But
first time well, it was the first time, but it happened before later on again.
but as you mentioned earlier, Cruyff himself later stated that they may have lost the final, but would be forever remembered, and
Yeah.
that seems to have been the case.
Yeah,
It's
I
Yeah,
think we can also remember Johan Cruyff was the best player never winning a World Cup final.
yeah, yeah.
Puskas. Yeah.
yeah, among others. Yeah.
For a long time, it was Messi as well until he got
Oh,
it
yeah.
only recently. Yeah.
Mhm.
But yeah, but I still have very, very fond memories, even if I look back at the games. And sometimes you do see it coming on Facebook or those kind of social media, the total football of the Dutch. And it's just like a hungry pack of wolves, the way that they put pressure on the opponent and went in for it was really impressive. And if you look at the team, the fact that a small country like Holland has got generational talents like Wim Jansen, Johan Neeskens, Ruud Krol, Rensenbrink, Rep, Cruyff, Van Hanegem. It's if you think about it, it's crazy.
While the 1988 squad did win the Euros, is it fair to say that this 1974 squad is always considered the yardstick to measure up to?
Absolutely. Yeah. The 88 squad, they didn't win their games easily. They didn't impress. They didn't impress against Ireland, for instance. Even the finals against the USSR was not a great game. We win, which is, like Jurryt said earlier, that's what it's about. So we shouldn't complain about it. But the quality of the football in 74 was just unbelievable.
But they
I
didn't
think,
win.
well, it didn't win. That's right. And I think the 98 World Cup, the quality of the football was amazing as well.
And
Didn't
then
win
I
that
was
either.
19 years old. I can remember I was not interested in football at that time at all,
Hmm.
but it was around me, everywhere. Everybody
Yeah.
and especially the match against Germany winning, it was even bigger than winning the final. And but maybe they were not good, but they won.
Yep, exactly. They did what they had to do to win. And I think you made a point earlier that the Dutch sometimes don't have that grit to win games. In 88, they did, I think. People
Yeah.
like Hans van Breukelen, Jan Wouters, they were fierce
Yeah.
and good.
There has been a half a century of what ifs. The Dutch journalist Martin Vos had told L'Equipe magazine that he was somewhat afraid as the Dutch journalists had egged on the Dutch players to humiliate Germany. There have been theories that the Dutch should not have played possession football after scoring. And I think Niskens at the post match banquet said that they had expected a German onslaught and were surprised as it did not come. So there are plenty of theories, and as how what would have made a difference for both of you. What is the thing upon reflection that you think would have made a difference? Or was it fate and anyway, had the Dutch played, they would have lost that day?
That's a tough one. I think if Germany would have scored a penalty in the first minute, we would have won the game, I think. I think that first 1-0 was not helping us. You see it often in football, an early goal, and everybody starts to relax a little bit, and the opponent starts to become a little bit more irate and motivated. I think scoring early goals is not a good thing. It's better to score the 1-0 in the last minute because then the opponent doesn't have the opportunity to get back into the game. That's my answer. Jurryt?
As a professional historian, I don't care. And of course, it happened. That's the fact I have to deal with. And of course, as a person, I have my own wishes and how they can go or should have been gone. But when I'm doing my research, I don't care. I have to find out what happened and try to understand what happened. And just because I'm Dutch, it doesn't mean the Dutch have more right to win a World Cup or whatever. Just like I live in Amsterdam, I should have been a supporter of Ajax, which I'm not. And also, if I'm doing research about Feyenoord, my favorite club, I don't care as a historian if they win or they lose. I'm
If
pissed off
Feyenoord scores, do you
if they,
cheer?
if I'm looking as a person, of course,
Yeah,
I want them to win. But
yeah.
if I'm doing my research, I really don't care.
No, that's very good. You can sort of divide that in your head. That's good.
Yeah, yeah. But I've plenty of time in my life. So after my research, then of course, I like to see some football matches or whatever. By trying to understand what happened, I understand everyone with personal reasons because that's also a part of my research about how people react and how they think. That's the cultural thing of football, how people think about it, how they respond, how it become a part of daily life in the Netherlands. That's also a part of my research. And so for me, it's even the reactions after are just as important as the matches themselves.
Yeah, well, I think it's fun. Every time I traveled a lot years ago, and I would go to Hong Kong or I would end up in San Francisco or wherever, I would come into a taxi and they would say, "Where are you from?" And then when you say I'm from the Netherlands, the first thing they say is, "Ah, Cruyff, Neeskens, Van
Yeah.
Gaal," and that later on it became Gullit, Van Basten,
Yeah, it's my generation, and now it's the generation of Robin van Persie.
Virgil. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah,
Yeah, it's
Virgil van
funny.
Dijk. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And that was all. I always thought that was funny. Anyway.
What was the aftermath in the greater Dutch football as a whole? And how did this World Cup affect you personally? I guess Jan, because you were knowledgeable, I guess, young football fan at this point.
I think just confidence. I think just realizing that we made an impact internationally and we were counted. In the past, it was Argentina, Brazil, England, and it wasn't the Netherlands. And then after 74, we were suddenly seen as football royalty. So that gave you some confidence. And of course, when you watch the teams play, like Feyenoord, Ajax, Twente, PSV, you start to copy what players do, the Cruyff turn. Every Dutch boy is able to do the Cruyff turn, that sort of thing. So it just lifted everything. It's like the water in the harbor goes up and all the boats go up with it. So I think Dutch football got a shot in the arm, which was great. Yeah, I think in general that's the what happened.
And for someone like myself who's not Dutch, whenever you hear the number 1974, the first thing that comes to our mind are these orange shirts. I
Mm,
mean, so that's been part of football culture for us. So I can't even imagine what it would be like for the Dutch themselves. So,
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Oh, I want to say one thing though, and I think Jurryt might have actually a really good background on this from a cultural, historical perspective. But for me, it always felt that national team supporters are a different type of people than the club supporters. I have the feeling that Feyenoord hooligans and Ajax hooligans are not as much national team fans, and it's more like families and more mellow people that seem to support a national team. But I'm not sure if this is true. But this is just an idea that I have. Jurrit, do you have an
That's
opinion on this?
a common idea. There is a difference between national and club supporters, and I think there is, because club supporters, they have matches every week, and national supporters, they have only several matches a year, and by luck some important tournaments every 2 years, which is not a common for Dutch football.
True.
And so I think the national team have more success supporters. When it's going better and better, then more and more people are watching.
Yeah.
And I don't know, they all are football supporters, but on a different level. And I don't know exactly there are differences and why they are and how, but there's a possibility. There's a different atmosphere when the national team is playing than when a club is playing. Because when Ajax is playing or Feyenoord is playing an international match, Ajax is playing, Rotterdam don't care. But if the national team is playing, everybody cares. Everybody is
Yeah.
watching. Yeah.
Yeah. But
And
typically with a national team game, you will see the wave in the stadium.
yeah.
You will not see the wave in the Feyenoord stadium when
No,
Feyenoord
I don't
plays.
like to wave at all. I don't
No,
like to wave at
no,
all. No.
no. Most
And
club
but
supporters don't
and
do it.
I don't know if the Netherlands are different than other countries, because I also can imagine there is a different opinion in England about the national squad and Manchester or Liverpool, and in Belgium or in France. So I think every country there is a difference between the national
Yeah.
supporters and the club supporters, so including the Netherlands.
Yeah. Yeah, could well be, could well be. I think the 76 European Championship 2 years later was a tournament that had a lot of expectation because of the big name players we had, and that became quite a disastrous tournament, of course. And it seems to be typical for the Dutch because we had the 2010 World Cup final under Bert van Marwijk, and it completely imploded in 2012. That seems to be haunting us. We've got a great tournament, and then nothing. We had the
1988,
title. Yeah,
1999,
Yeah.
the
we
World
had the
Cup in
title.
19.
I was about to
Mm,
say the
mm.
title in 88 and complete implosion in 1990. I don't know what that is.
Yeah.
Someone
Maybe the
needs to
biggest
fix that.
mark of 74 on Dutch football, it was too big to handle, because every time again, even now, all the players are always referred to 1974, just like Feyenoord. The success of 1970, after 1970, it was a heavy stone, it was a burden.
Mm.
Everybody was telling, oh, why we're not winning again the European Cup? It was a once in a lifetime experiences. Ajax, it's the same. Also, now it becomes a burden, all the successes of the past.
Mm.
And we have to maybe find a new tradition.
That is a
Just
good
like
point.
the total football, it started as a tradition in the Netherlands because we didn't have any, and now we have too many traditions to replace it by a better one.
In closing, what is the legacy of this 1974 World Cup for the Dutch? You already mentioned some of them. Historically and culturally, and does it reverberate until today?
Yes,
The
because
last
it's the
thing,
start of
yes.
the color orange as the
Yeah,
symbol of Dutch football.
that is typically that is a good symbol indeed. But I think also a lot of coaches today still refer to 74 and Cruyff's impact. So I think it has a lasting impact for sure. There's a guy in Australia who's got three sons, and the names of his sons are Cruyff, Boston, and I think Naskins, but I'm not sure about the third one. But that's the names of his kids. So I think, yeah, I think it has a lasting legacy. I think the Wengers, the Pep Guardiolas, they still refer to it. So I believe so. And I also think that Jurryt said it earlier that there is this burden probably felt by every football player of the national team that they do want to win the World Cup one day. They want to show that they can do it because we need to win this at one point. We're the biggest football country that never won a World Cup.
We can have an example of a good burden. I think it's Brazil. After the 1950 burden of losing the final match in their own country against Uruguay, skipping their shirt change from white to yellow, and then winning all the World Cups after.
Yeah,
So there can
yeah,
also be a good burden.
yeah. Good point. Yeah, yeah. Arrogance is also still a part of it.
Oh
Yeah.
I
yeah,
do have to say. Yeah,
especially the Amsterdam
sadly.
arrogance. I'm a part of it.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, at a certain level, it's good. You need to be self-confident. I like that Ajax mentality where they say we're already 1-0 up because you're playing us. You see the jersey, you see the stadium. And I think Feyenoord, the Kuip at this point in time, it's just madness. I see videos of people from the United States and England going to Rotterdam to watch a Feyenoord game, and they just can't believe what's going on. The number of flags and flares just for the warming up, not even for the game. So I think there's a really, really fun culture around football, but we need to start winning trophies, as every coach would say. International trophies, I mean.
Well, the women did in 2017.
Yeah, they did. They did. Yeah, absolutely. They had and the young Orange is doing pretty well, and the under 19, the under 70s has won the trophy, I think, last season. AZ youth team is doing incredibly well internationally, winning the Youth Champions League a couple of years ago. So we're starting to get there, I think. And I'm not joking. Next World Cup in the US, I think we have a good chance of winning that if everybody stays fit. It's looking at me as if I'm.
I don't know. I'm a historian, so I'm good in history. I'm not so good in tomorrow.
Well,
Excellent.
perhaps the greatest legacy of this 1974 team is that they will forever be remembered as one of the best teams not to have won the World Cup.
For sure.
Yeah.
When you talk about legacy, I think we shouldn't forget that Johan Cruyff did not go to the 78 World Cup, partly because of what happened around that Bill swimming pool incident. So talking about the legacy, we could have had Cruyff in Argentina in 78, but we didn't.
With that, I would like to thank both of you for your participation in this interview.
Sure.
And all our respective contact information is listed on the blog and podcast uploads. So, thank you both and hope to continue these discussions on Dutch football history.
Thank you, Jurryt. Nice meeting you, man.
Yeah, thank you for the same.
Thank you.